Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Fujifilm GFX 50S2. With the introduction of GFX 100S, Fujifilm basically puts together great 44mm format output and usability of a normal mirrorless camera. GFX 50S2 is probably Fujifilm's attempt to move the 44mm format closer to the mainstream. In this video we will take a look at the output and the feature set of GFX 50S2 to find out whether it can really be a valid mainstream camera. On the outside, the GFX 50S2 is identical to the GFX 100S, which is definitely a good thing. The size is similar to full-frame DSLRs such as Canon 5D Mark IV. It is not a small camera in absolute terms, but it is a small camera in medium format terms. It weighs 900 grams including the battery and the SD card, which is in my opinion still completely fine for all-round use. The overall portability will mostly depend on the lenses. That is why the new 35 to 70mm f4.5 to 5.6 is a really important lens for the system, but I will talk about that later. The build quality is outstanding. It uses a magnesium frame of course, and most of the surface is rubberized with a very nice texture. It definitely feels like a very premium product, so I have no complaints here. It is also fully weather sealed. GFX 50S2 uses a 50MP 44mm sensor. This is a relatively old sensor. It is not backside illuminated and it has pretty slow readout. The best thing about this sensor is simply its size. It is still about 40% larger than a full-frame sensor and the output is undeniably still fantastic. 50MP is quite a conservative resolution for a 44mm sensor. Having said that, 50MP is still a lot, so it can definitely capture a ton of detail. It has relatively low pixel density, which means that it is not very demanding when it comes to the lens quality, although optically bad lenses aren't really available for the GFX system. The overall image quality is still excellent. There is no doubt that the GFX 50S2 takes beautiful images. The ISO performance isn't really better than with modern BSI full-frame sensors. ISO 3200 is very clean and perfectly usable. There is some noise at ISO 6400, but it is still usable for majority of publication platforms. ISO 12800 is still usable, but the noise is clearly visible. Unfortunately, there is also some color shift. I definitely can't say that the GFX 50S2 is bad in the low light, but BSI full-frame sensors can at least match it due to much superior sensor technology. That isn't really a great result for GFX 50S2. It is also far behind the GFX 100S, which is about one stop cleaner. The dynamic range is still great though. You can basically push it as far as you want to. You can recover a lot of detail from both shadows and highlights even in extreme HDR scenes. The amount of noise in recovered shadows is very low. Unless you are printing some high ISO stills with a lot of shadow recovery, you don't need to be worried about the noise at all. Regarding the autofocus, that is unfortunately a weakness of GFX 50S2. It only uses contrast detection points. I would generally say that it is good enough for stationary subjects. It is definitely one of the better contrast detection systems, so focusing when you are shooting landscapes or portraits is okay. It isn't particularly fast, but it also isn't annoyingly slow. If you need to shoot moving subjects or be able to acquire focus really quickly, this is probably not the best camera for you. Video autofocus is pretty typical for contrast detection based systems. It is okay for easy situations such as outdoor infinity focusing. If you use it in a more difficult situations such as backlight scenes or focusing from close distance to infinity, there will be a lot of hunting. The handling is identical to the GFX 100S, which means that it is very good. GFX 50S2 uses the usual DSLR style controls, so there are no dedicated shutter speed or ISO dials. It has a simple mode switch and traditional front and rear command dials. The grip is quite deep and very well shaped. I think that it will be suitable even for users with larger hands. Interestingly, there is no 4-way pad. At this size, I would definitely prefer having it here, but I can live without it. The camera fortunately is optimized to manage even without the 4-way pad. 50S2 has a joystick which can be used for menu navigation. Custom buttons are also very well placed. Fujifilm also has the best quick menu in my opinion, which can be used for quick access to the most important settings. A very big deal for me are separate modes for stills and video. That means that you are still setting one effect video and vice versa. I use very different settings for stills and video, so this makes my life much easier. The main menu is better than with Sony or Nikon, but there is still a room for improvement. It is pretty well structured and the order of the items makes sense. Unfortunately, it still can't be controlled by the touchscreen, which is a bit of shame in 2021. There is a status display on the top of the camera. It is the best one that I've ever seen. It shows all of the usual information and it can also work in always-on mode. The in-body image stabilization is a big strength of this camera. Fujifilm claims 6.5 stops of stabilization and it really is one of the best in-body image stabilization systems that I've tested. At 28mm full-frame equivalent, you can go down to about 1/4 of the second without seeing any blur at 100% magnification, which is a great result. Again, I haven't tested it much for the video because honestly, this is not a good video camera. It can only shoot 1080p video up to 30p, which are very poor video specifications. 1080p video quality is decent, but basically anything with 4K video can easily beat GFX 50S 2. I think that there is no need to go further into this. If you need medium format video, you will have to get the GFX 100S. That is actually a great video camera that can shoot 4K and it also has face detection autofocus points. The Viewfinder uses a 3.69 million dot panel with 0.77 times magnification. It is very similar to the X-T4 EVF and that is fine. It is not as impressive as the latest 5.7 or 9.4 million dot viewfinders, but it is completely fine to use and it saves some space. The display is fantastic. It uses a 3.2-inch panel with 2.36 million dots. It is basically a 4x3 version of a well-known 2.1 million dot panel. This is the best display that is currently being used on cameras. It is very sharp, very bright, and simply a joy to work with. It uses a 3-way tilting mechanism, which is my most favorite type of display mount. It is great for shooting in both horizontal and vertical direction. I am very glad that this camera was spared from having a rotating screen, which really doesn't belong on a camera such as this one. GFX 50S2 can continuously shoot at 3 frames per second. Just like with the video, there is not much to talk about here. If you need a fast camera, this is not it. GFX 100S can shoot 5 frames per second, which is still not particularly fast, but it is definitely fast enough for all-round use. GFX 50S2 has 2 UHS-2 SD card slots. That is also fine in my opinion. UHS-2 cards are fast enough for all-round use even with 100 MB RAWs. 50S2 is the second GFX camera which uses the new NP-W235 batteries that we know from X-T4. The battery life is rated for 420 shots. Considering that it powers a 44mm sensor with an IBIS unit, high-resolution display and quad-core CPU, I think that 420 shots is a good value. Real-world battery life depends on the usage, but most users should be able to get 600 or 700 shots on a full charge, which is a very good result. The battery can also be charged through USB-C, which is very useful as a backup option. Fujifilm has also released a new base kit lens, which is the GF 35-70mm f4.5 to 5.6 WR. It offers 28 to 55mm equivalent focal range, and the aperture will be very similar to f3.5 to 4.5 full-frame lenses. It is very compact by 44mm format standards and reasonably versatile. The resolving capabilities and overall image quality seems to be really good for a kit lens. I will try to make a full review of this lens with the GFX 100S, but my first impression suggests that it is definitely worth the extra $500 in a kit with GFX 50S too. To sum up, Fujifilm GFX 50S II definitely has some major strengths, but some of its drawbacks make it a bit of a niche camera. The image quality that you can get with GFX 50S II is excellent. I think that this is a very good camera for photographers interested in 44mm format look who don't need a fast camera. Those will mainly be landscape and studio photographers. These photographers will get very impressive output supported by excellent in-body image stabilization and Fujifilm's latest GFX body style. If you need something faster, more all-round usable, or you need to shoot video, I definitely recommend paying the extra for GFX 100S. Face detection autofocus system, 4K video, and faster shooting speed make it much better all-round usable camera. It also has double the resolution, which still makes a big difference since the GFX lenses can resolve that pixel density. GFX 50S II may also be a valid alternative to a high-resolution full-frame cameras for some users, but that is a story for another time. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.